All right, I'm back. This is part two. We'll do a little more hands-on stuff now. And what I'd like to get at is we're going to demonstrate how easy it is to use a MIG welder. The way a MIG welder works is it pushes the wire out of a liner. It's controlled by a simple switch inside the machine. You pull this trigger and it basically feeds out a wire and opens a solenoid that allows the gas to come out. The gas is for shielding and protects the weld. I'm not going to get into the science of why, but if you're going to try and do a decent MIG weld, don't use one of those cheap flux core machines. In fact, you are completely wasting your money if you even buy one. Best thing you could buy, if you don't plan on using gas with a MIG welder, you can't afford the lease for the gas or whatever, get yourself a little stick welder. A stick welder will do a much better weld, won't cost you nearly so much. Rods are cheap and easily found, you know, sometimes for free here and there, and you'll just come across them. It does take a little more skill to learn how to burn rods, but a MIG welder is incredibly easy to use, and as long as it's set up right and you have that shielding gas, it's like using a caulking gun. It means it's really, really simple. I'm surprised there's no better videos on YouTube for how to do it, but anyway, here's the shielding gas. You'll notice the regulator is set for between 20 and 30 CFMs. That's your high pressure, and this is your low pressure. This is basically a kind of a flow meter. This is not really a flow meter, but this is showing you the flow rate approximately. A proper flow meter has a ball bearing that is very accurate about showing you the flow of gas. Anyway, let's get some welding going on here. Just a quick thing about helmets. If you're getting into welding, get yourself a real good automatic helmet. Do not buy a cheap ass welding helmet. You're only throwing money away, and it's one of those things, it's pay me now or pay me later, but you want to spend at least $150 on a welding helmet. That only gets you basically a good lower end helmet that, you know, can stand some abuse. the Arc 1 helmets, Arc 1 kind of makes a lot of cheap stuff, but their upper end stuff is pretty tough. I've had a lot of different automatic helmets. I had a Phantom and I had a Celstrom. All good helmets. The Phantom was very tough. It had a lot of room inside for respirators and things, but this one here is kind of tight inside, but one benefit of this is you can stick your head in some tight spots. If you're going to buy Arc 1, buy their industrial series, okay? This has been a very tough helmet. It's been everywhere. It's been out to Alberta. It's had to live in shit beat out of it, and it's still going strong and never had an issue with it. It has, pretty much all of them now have a sensitivity dial. That's there for if you're working out in the sunlight or in the dark. You can change it so it triggers at the right times. Maybe you have a welder working right beside you and your helmet keeps switching when you don't want it to. That's what this is for. The shade 10 up to, well, sorry, this machine goes from 7 up to 14. Shade 10 is sort of the average for like burning 1/8 rods or welding 1/4 inch steel. You know, if you're welding some thin sheet metal, you put her down to 7 or 8, something like that. And if you're gouging or something, you might put her up to 13. You're doing some aluminum TIG welding at 300 amps, you might put it up to 14 or more, because that shit is bright. All right. I have to apologize. I have a bit of a cold and I keep sniffling and stuff like that. But anyway, we're going to do a quick pass with this machine, and then we'll start to get into how to make changes with your settings. I have not changed any settings on this machine from when I fiddled with it. I've got a piece of 3/16 angle iron right here. I'm just going to weld into the middle of that, and I've got my machine set at 20.2 and 246. One thing to note with MIG welders, if you've never set them or what have you, these dials are set up like this for a reason. If you find that 22 volts is working good for you for 1/4 inch steel, a good starting point of where to set the wire feed speed is more or less exactly the same. That's a good starting point. It's not going to vary much. It may go that low, it may go this high. It just depends on if you're getting some burn through or if you're trying to fill a gap or what have you. The numbers really don't mean a lot. It's more or less a feel thing. This is your heat, this is your fill. If you're having a problem filling the gap, but it's burning good, turn this up. If you're getting a piled up weld, turn this down. If it's too hot and it keeps melting through, turn this back a bit. If when you did that, it starts pushing back the wire, turn this down along with it. The numbers, again, you can put pieces of tape over that, they don't mean shit. It's just sort of a reference. The reality is you change these dials as you need to change them. Do not be afraid to change dials between every single weld. You know, there's people, they think that they can set this up and it should be doing a good job all day long, even though they're changing positions and welding up and overhead and down. And you know, the reality is you are not a good welder if you're not changing these constantly. Making a simple minor change like that just to fine-tune a little weld so you can do a better job, that differentiates you from a quality welder and a hack. So don't be afraid to change your dials. So I'm just going to go with those numbers. This weld may suck, but what it's going to show you is if the weld isn't working out, then we're going to make changes to make it work out. And I'm going to show you how to make those changes. So I'm just going to quickly snip this wire off. Never burn it on the other, you know, some guys will put that gun under the table and burn that off. Don't do that shit. Pros don't do that. So do a little weld here, see what happens. Okay, it's kind of hard to hold the camera and do this at the same time, but that weld came out more or less perfect. I can't really see too many problems except a little bit of a spatter problem. The weld was a little bit, I think my wire feed was just slightly low. And what happens is you get a little bit of globular action happening there. So the voltage seemed to be pretty good. So I'm just going to make a minor change, not much of one. You see how subtle that was. And we'll try it again. Now you see how that sounded a little bit nicer? Didn't really change the appearance of the weld much, but it eliminated my spatter problem. The balls of spatter were smaller. That'll make them less likely to bond and therefore easier to clean up with a wire wheel or just by knocking them off. They're likely not welded on, but I know you can't see that with the camera, but there's a couple here from the first weld that are, you know, they're almost a millimeter across and they're definitely welded on. Well, not definitely welded on, but you can probably knock them off. But so anyway, that's video 2. We'll move on to some more advanced techniques as we go along. Stay tuned for video 3.